Hi, I'm Shreena Gandhi, a fixed-term assistant professor of religious studies at Michigan State University, which occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. My areas of specialization are religion in the Americas, the history of yoga in the United States, and critical race studies. I'm coming to you from my dining room in Okemos, Michigan, and it is my honor to stand in solidarity with my fellow scholars for this scholar strike for Black lives and racial justice. Today, I'm going to talk about a facet of white supremacy, cultural appropriation, and its connection to whiteness and racism. Cultural appropriation may seem like a small cog in the larger system of white supremacy, but examining it illuminates how white supremacy works and the role you play in perpetuating and reifying it. Whiteness is a category and identity that has been developed over time in the United States as something oppositional to Blackness. In the Americas, different groups of European settlers gained access to whiteness and the power and fallacy of superiority that came with it, often within a generation. This happened by engaging in anti-Black racism and making an exchange of culture for power. Culture roots us, gives us something by which to build community and identity. Power does not. It is rootless and really only interested in building and maintaining itself. So in that exchange, there is also a loss, a rootlessness that emerges, which is often rectifying by engaging in cultural appropriation. This may seem like individual choices, but they are informed by history and structures that make these choices possible. Appropriation, in the context of the history of colonialism, is not exchange or appreciation of another culture, but the taking from cultures that are seen as inferior and have experienced enslavement, genocide, and colonization by places self-defined as Western and superior. In academia, this often means going native, policing people of color on cultural authenticity, or even creating a minstrel identity of Black, Indigenous, or Brown people. This is violence. Other forms show up in the appropriation of music, dance, clothing, hairstyles, tattoos, jewelry, rituals, etc. The parts of culture that are often visible, exportable, and easily commodified. The parts of non-white cultures that deals with talking to your kids about how they will experience racism, figuring out how to be safe from racial violence, the creation of non-heteronormative or nuclear families in the face of forced familial separation, or ancestral and generational trauma because of enslavement and colonialism. That's not appropriated, because that can't be packaged for feel-good consumption. These are parts of people of color's culture that are uncomfortable and are difficult, but they are also revelatory, instructive, and make clear that we have a white supremacy problem. I have found that white people, liberals, conservatives, progressives, etc., get offended and defensive when talking about cultural appropriation. White people watching this might feel this way right now, and Black and Brown and Indigenous people might be nodding their heads along. We live in a capitalist economy in which, with the right amount of money, we are told we can acquire or have anything. And I think being told no, you can't have this, or that your accumulation of other people's culture is destructive or violent, these things often hit a nerve, because ultimately it means coming to terms with the ways in which we are all complicit in implicit and explicit ways with white supremacy culture. This also means non-Black people of color that engage in anti-Black racism, but also appropriate music, hairstyles, language, etc. And non-Indigenous people of color that traffic in Indigenous sacred rituals or materials without thinking about who and where these places came from, or where these parts of culture came from. Dismantling white supremacy culture not only means examining whiteness, but also taking concrete, tangible actions to give up your privilege and power. One way of doing this is listening, particularly to Black and Indigenous people when they say something is cultural appropriation, and to please stop it. As I said earlier, oftentimes the parts of culture that are appropriated are often the parts that are easily packaged, which can lead to caricatures of the community, which then further entrenches anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism in your life. So one small step, one that you can take today, is to look at how you engage in cultural appropriation, why you do it, and how you stop it. Then think of ways to give back and stand with these communities through fighting against police brutality, for racial justice, and creating policy changes that will lead to the dismantling of structural white supremacy. And this action item is not just directed at white viewers, but also my fellow brown viewers, especially my South Asian community. We need to be better about appropriating Black culture while engaging in anti-Black racism, instead of acting in solidarity with them against white supremacy. Thank you, and I hope that you have found this useful in thinking about the ways in which white supremacy works in our everyday lives through cultural appropriation. By examining and changing how we engage in cultural appropriation is but one point by which we can work together towards the larger process of eradicating white supremacy. Thank you, and Black Lives Matter.